Breaking news just moments ago from the Washington Post, reporting that a Manhattan grand jury has filed criminal indictments against the Trump Organization and his longtime chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg. The indictments came down tonight, but will remain sealed until tomorrow afternoon, leaving us in the dark about the specific charges until then, although they are expected to be focused on tax-related crimes. The Post also reports that Alan Weisselberg is expected to surrender at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office tomorrow morning and will be arraigned later in the day. The Trump Organization, the entity, the company itself, will also be arraigned, represented by a lawyer. These are the first charges resulting from the nearly 3-year investigation into Donald Trump and his businesses. Trump himself is not expected to be charged with any crimes at this time. The charges against his business will, of course, exacerbate his legal issues, and charges against Weisselberg could increase pressure on the longtime CFO to flip on his boss. Joining me now by phone, one of the Washington Post reporters who just broke that story, David Fahrenthold. David, what more can you tell us?
Well, tomorrow, as you said, we will learn more about the evidence that the Manhattan DA has against Alan Weisselberg and the Trump Organization. We anticipate that the charges filed tomorrow, well, two things about them. We anticipate that they will relate to taxes that should have been paid on payments, benefits to Trump Organization executives. This will not just be one or two, missed tax payments. This may be sort of alleged as a conspiracy or something that happened over a long period of time. We also don't believe this to be the end of the case. I think this will be the first charges in this case, but I don't think that we're seeing the end. In fact, we may be sort of seeing the beginning as prosecutors put their pressure on Weisselberg in the hopes that he will flip and become one of their witnesses.
Yeah, and Weisselberg obviously has been the key here all this entire time. And the question, I think, was, we knew investigators were looking around Weisselberg. We also know that in the past, investigators had looked to Michael Cohen. Initially, Michael Cohen had not flipped. He had been, had a search warrant served on him. He had been charged. And then he ended up striking a deal for testimony in exchange for leniency. Clearly, that's the number one fear, I would imagine, for Donald Trump or for people in his orbit.
That's right. I mean, Michael Cohen, as you said, he had a huge amount of other liabilities that didn't have to do much with his work with Donald Trump. He had some related to that. He also had a whole entanglement involving taxi licenses and loans in New York City that was part of the pressure on him to flip. Michael Cohen thought he might spend more than 10 years in prison. He changed his tune and he testified, he pleaded guilty, but also testified against Trump. We'll see tomorrow what kind of sentence is facing Weisselberg. Is he talking about some kind of offense that usually just gets off with a fine, or is he looking at something that could be years and years in prison? Weisselberg's in his 70s. Will he feel the pressure that Michael Cohen felt? As I said, it's really hard to evaluate this case until you know what's going to happen with Weisselberg, and it's really hard to know what's going to happen with Weisselberg until you see what he's facing tomorrow.
And the arraignment of again, it's sort of a strange to sort of encounter the legal fiction or legal entity of the corporation and its arraignment. Obviously, the corporation cannot march into court. It highlights, I think, how relatively rare criminal charges are against a business enterprise or a corporation. What do we know about that channel of charges?
Well, as you said, the Trump Organization will be represented in court by a lawyer who will probably enter a not guilty plea on its behalf. It'll be interesting to me to see what specifically they charge, what entity. The Trump Organization has more than 500 different LLCs. It's created on purpose to be sort of this opaque nest of LLCs that all own pieces of each other, all reporting back up to Trump. So I'll be interested to see which entities they charge. You could. These cases probably they're not that common, but when they do happen, they often end in fines for the companies that have been charged. But there's also sort of collateral damage, or there could be collateral damage, if it makes banks, lenders, people who have contracts with the Trump Organization leery of doing business with an indicted company.